Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Councillor Jackie Dyer, and I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council, Lambeth, and Cabinet Member for Job Skills and Community Safety. I really welcome you to this event as we pursue our ambition to make Lambeth as safe as possible for our women and girls going forward. So our ambition is to end violence against women and girls in Lambeth. And we have developed a strategy, a draft strategy, which we want to share with you to test with you whether or not we're going in the right direction in terms of what our priorities are, and really looking from you about how you're going to work with us to support us to make sure that our ambitions are realised for all our women and girls within the borough. And so I will hand over to our Strategic Director for Children's Services, Merlin Joseph, who will help you to understand the works that we are doing on this agenda. Thank you. Merlin.
Thank you, Jackie. Am I live?
Yes. I think they need to change the slide.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dyer. As Jackie says, my name is Merlin Joseph and I'm the Strategic Director for Children's Services. And like Councillor Dyer says, I'm really pleased to be able to present this draft strategy to you this evening. I'm going to take you through the draft strategy, but as Councillor Dyer has said, this is really an opportunity to hear from you in terms of what we presented thus far and how we can help shape, strengthen it, so it's absolutely meeting the needs of women and young women and girls who face violence every single day. Okay, next slide, please. So we use the term violence against women and girls to recognise that there are forms of violence and abuse that disproportionately affect women and girls and are usually perpetrated by men. However, people of any gender can experience abuse of this nature, and the consequences affect everyone. VAWG has a devastating impact on victims and survivors, children, communities, and its cost to society is long-lasting and wide-ranging. It robs individuals of their safety in public and private spaces, their choice and well-being, and can cause significant trauma. It can affect everyone at any point in their life, but it's not inevitable, and we all have a role to play in tackling it. Next slide, please. This will be our third violence against women strategy. And while an enormous amount has been achieved in the past 10 years, due to the hard work and commitment of partners, there is still much to be done. We are now in a stronger position to develop better processes to work in partnership with our communities to strengthen our understanding of where there are differences in reporting, responses, risk and outcomes for individuals experiencing violence against women and girls. Next slide, please. The new draft strategy has been in development for over a year. We have reviewed our previous actions and examined the data available to us to understand our successes, gaps, and lessons learned. From the early stages of design and development, we have worked with those who have lived an experience of violence against women and girls. Expert by experience are best placed to advise us on what solutions, support, and services will make positive differences to people's lives. We worked in partnership to co-produce a model for a public consultation, which included focus groups, events, one-to-one interviews, and surveys. We used this model to speak with victims and survivors, residents and practitioners from a range of organisations to develop the priorities and goals outlined in this new draft strategy. This model of experts by experience are communities and agencies working together in equal partnership will be built into the delivery and evaluation of all our work going forward to ensure we have a coordinated community response. We presented all our findings to a project board made up of representatives from across key statutory and voluntary services, and an expert by experience. Taking what professionals, residents have told us, we made commitments as a partnership and on behalf of our agencies and departments. We then developed an initial draft of the strategy that was sent to critical friends from across specialist services for their expert opinion. This shaped the draft and made much more robust and inclusive document that places intersectionality at its heart, understanding that violence against women and girls must be understood in the context of wider structural inequalities and discrimination. Next slide, please. As we've already heard from Councillor Dyer, our vision and ambition is that Lambeth is a borough where everyone is safe, where every resident feels safe in all public and private spaces and can meet their full potential free from violence or abuse. Every victim and survivor of violence against women and girls can access specialist support, and we recognise and remove barriers to that support. We prevent violence against women and girls from happening, but when it is done, we hold those responsible to account. We challenge and address all the forms of inequality and discrimination that causes violence against women and girls, particularly among children and young people, so they are safe and have healthy relationships. VAWG is understood in the context of wider structural inequalities and discrimination. We recognise the individual experience of victims and survivors and tailor support to meet the needs of our residents. We work in partnership with all Lambeth residents, communities and practitioners to deliver a truly coordinated community response. Next slide, please. These priorities were created from what residents and practitioners told us. The strategy outlines our goals, where we need to be and what we're aiming for, and our commitments, how we will reach our goals. Next slide, please. We are proposing that the strategy runs for 6 years, so from 2021 to 2027. And that is made up of the 5 strategic priorities with intersectionality and anti-racism as principles underpinning them all. That these strategic priorities will be reviewed at a halfway point, and we will have annual action plans that will be published. That delivery needs to be everyone's responsibility. So I've just given you a brief overview of what the strategy, the draft strategy entails. And really I'm going to now turn to Councillor Dyer, who's going to now lead on the questions and answers. And I would really like to emphasise this is a draft strategy and we absolutely need your views, comments as to what we can do to strengthen this draft strategy, because go back to the beginning that we want Lambeth to be the safe place for everyone to grow up in. Thanks very much. And I'll hand over to Councillor Jackie Dyer.
Many thanks, Merlin, and thank you for really giving us that condensed sort of overview about the work that we're doing in relation to this strategy. I'm smiling because I'm really happy also to have your leadership on making this happen. And so in terms of really helping our communities to understand that we're very serious on this agenda, it's great to know that officers are fully committed for delivery. But the most important part of helping us to deliver this strategy is harnessing our community members to assist us in doing this work. And so what underpins the whole of the delivery of the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy and our Lambeth Made Safer strategy, which is addressing the violence which affects young people. And both of these strategies have to be aligned because many of our women are also parents, and many of our young people are people that have families and parents who are women. And so we have to understand the interrelationship and the alignment of these two very key strategies in terms of of delivery. But our focus here today is around the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, otherwise known as the acronym VAWG. And underpinning, as I said, these two strategies is the Lambeth Made Communities, which is the way that we do community engagement in Lambeth going forward in order to help to make Lambeth safer. So what this is an opportunity for you to do is to ask questions, give feedback, ask for points of clarity about what you've heard thus far and what you think is where we might need to strengthen, what your ideas are. What do you think that we need to do in terms of the community response in particular, or community involvement rather, in particular? Children and young people, how do we reduce harm from perpetrators, and really around working together. These areas are really critical for us to have an understanding of about what you think really matters, what you think that if we incorporate this into the strategy, how we can make this really successful. So in a way, over to you. And if you could write, I don't know where you post the questions. Could somebody help me with that? Where people post the questions so that I can sort of see them? Where are the, I don't know where the questions are.
Can you hear me, Councillor Dyer?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see no questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the questions out that are being published. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if other people can hear me, but Merlin and Councillor Dyer. So the first question is, did you include perpetrators in the consultation?
Okay. Hang on. Okay. Do you want me to, shall I take that question?
Yes.
Okay. So involving perpetrators, we didn't consult directly with perpetrators individually, but we included a question in the survey to ask if those answering consider themselves to be a perpetrator. We would design perpetrators in the design of interventions if this can be done safely.
Thanks, Merlin. I hope people can still hear me. So the second question for either of you really is, as has been acknowledged, most of the violence against women and girls is perpetrated by boys and men. I'd like to know how the strategy aims to work with boys and men in tackling violence, and that's from Bridget.
So, one of the ways, so for example, the work that we're doing with children and young people, cross-cut as part of this strategy, cross-cuts into the Lambeth Made Safer. And I think that one of the most critical things is around the education and training component about changing the way that women and girls are perceived in a misogynistic way, but also looking at violence in and of itself, that this is something that our communities from the cradle to the grave need to be better educated in, and we have a shared understanding and language about how to treat our fellow human beings, whatever age, whatever gender, whatever race, with respect and non-violence. And I think that kind of like relationship, how we relate to one another, is going to be a critical strand of training that we'll be co-producing with our children and young people, our men and our boys, our women and our girls, that will be training that, and our communities that will be training that we will deliver right across schools, colleges, communities, right with the police, right across the board, so that we have a consistent language, a shared language of how to be mutually respectful with one another, that absolutely addresses the mindset that thinks it's okay to be abusive towards women and girls, and actually to be abusive to anybody. And we've actually tabled this particular education and training program as one of our key ambitions within our UNICEF application to be a child-friendly Lambeth borough. And so in our shared work stream around education and training, between the VAWG strategy and the Lambeth Made Safer strategy, we will be harnessing this work. So we'll be able to engage yourselves, but also report to you on a quarterly level how we are delivering against these activities, or this particular activity from the work stream. So I really think that this is a massive opportunity for us to change the narrative, change the culture of disrespect that we're finding even in our schools, of how young boys are treating young girls, and then it's all the way through, and we need to disrupt that and harness and support more positive, constructive, respectful ways of engaging with one another that builds relationships that are humane, trusting, and honouring of individual human rights. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Merlin.
No, I think you've covered it very comprehensively, Councillor Dyer. I mean, and just to echo in terms of our innovation to become a child-friendly borough, as Councillor Dyer said. So we have made our submission to UNICEF, and last week we heard that we are going to be put forward for the programme. So we're really, really pleased about that. And part of being a child-friendly borough is again about involving the community in supporting us with that charge. And one of the several badges that you go forward through to receive UNICEF status, and one of that is around being safe and secure, and that in consultation with some of our young people, that was the #1 priority for them. I think as people are aware, you know, in terms of everyone's invited, we are working with our schools around this agenda, and violence against women and girls obviously is the strategy, but as I've said earlier, it encompasses all, and it's important that we work with our children at very, very early age in terms of respecting individuals, and particularly in respecting girls. So some of that work is currently happening with our schools, and there'll be a number of workshops following. We've just received obviously the Ofsted report into everyone's invited, and we're just going through that to look at what we can put in place to support schools with this agenda to tackle these issues at the earliest opportunity.
And I think the other thing there, Merlin, is about how are we supporting our children and young people to actually really recognise these issues. So I think it's really important that children and young people are really supported to be able to identify, name, recognise and have spaces where they can go in confidence and trust to be able to share their experiences, because some of these experiences may be happening at school, some may be happening at home, some may be happening within their networks, and we really need to build a whole sort of infrastructure across the communities and schools and communities whereby people can safely articulate that these are some of the challenges that they're facing. But actually you need to help our children and young people, our women and our girls, our men and our young men, to be able to articulate, to name, to identify what the dynamics, what the nature of the abuse, what the nature of the disrespect is that's taking place. And then for them to feel empowered to be able to challenge it appropriately in the right arenas and to get support when they do so in that regard. And so we have to have networks of support right across the borough at every level to make this happen if we truly want to make Lambeth really safe for our women and girls. And I think that part of the work that we're doing is around school, in terms of schools, Merlin, I think that you referred to, I can't remember if you specified that bit, is around delivering sex and relationships education to include consent and healthy relationships. And also that's part of a strand of this work that we will make sure that we closely monitor and develop, so that we again have a consistent approach to how we're fulfilling this education and training part of the agenda.
Absolutely, Councillor Dye. And I think one of the things around this agenda is that I think it's fantastic it's been raised, but I think the practice has been that it's been normalised, and what we have to do is disrupt that normalisation, and that's the whole culture shift in being able to shift that within our schools. One of the things that we're doing is absolutely working with our youth council, with young advisors, with our children in care council, you know, to help us to support teachers who over many years, we know through the report, didn't have the skill set to intervene into some of these issues. So we have social workers in schools, mental health workers in schools, but we need to equip our young people with, and particularly our girls, with the confidence to shout out should they be subject to any form of harassment, disrespect, sexual assault, and the such like. But it's not going to be an easy journey. But I think as a system, as a partnership, people want to make a difference, and I think this VAWG strategy is part of that difference to Lambeth.
Thank you both. Actually, there are a number of questions that have been published since that question about exactly what you're both just saying about, which seems to be coming up in a number of questions, which is anonymous. Howard, plans to instruct children to recognise these issues. What do you see as the role of education in schools? There's a number of those, and actually you've just sort of answered those, which is really helpful. So I'll move on to the next question from anonymous. How would young girls who've experienced sexual assault for the first time know where to go to get this support? Merlin, do you want to take that one?
Okay. I'm just thinking. I mean, there's lots of avenues where young girls can go. I mean, I don't know whether or not Sophie, you'd like to pick it up, because obviously you'll have much more detail. But there's lots of voluntary agencies that can support girls. Obviously, they can say to schools that hopefully they will be able to talk to their parents. And in particular, it's really important because obviously schools have a huge role to play, because you know, young girls spend a lot of time within the school site. So it's really important that they're able to build trusted relationships with their teacher or pastoral support. There's a safeguarding lead in our schools. We have community campus police within our schools. And as I said, we've got social workers. We do have the police. I know sometimes it can be difficult for young girls to feel confident in going to our police forces, but I know that there's probably a lot more avenues for our young girls to share that experience. And I don't know whether Sophie or Rose, you might want to just pick up in terms of any detail around that.
I mean, absolutely, as you've said, Merlin, but we know we need to promote these services that we have available in all the spaces that young people are. We need help from schools, we need help from communities, and we need to keep doing it. But also, as you mentioned, we need services embedded in the places that young people are. We need our schools officers. We have early intervention workers operating in schools, but it is it's an ongoing task that we need to keep on at.
Thank you.
We've got so many questions, so I'm going to move us on. A question for Councillor Dyer, I think. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse and a single mum. I'd like to know how to get more involved. That's from Alice.
What a wonderful contribution, and this is exactly what we're here to do. And I really look forward to your helping us to do this work. So anybody who is on this call who wants to sort of really be involved in the delivery of this strategy, if you could share your details. Rose and Sophie, if you could share your details in the chat, then we're willing to, we're welcoming, not even willing, welcoming your engaging with us, and we'll keep you as part of the network of, say, like VAWG champions for the borough. And it's the community, especially with lived experience, that are going to be our best advocates for really driving this agenda forward. And so I'll make sure that we have that sort of like network of community champions that we can look to help us to deliver elements of our strategy where appropriate, but really at that grassroots kind of like level. And another way that we're going to make that happen is, as I said earlier, which is around the Lambeth made communities. So in each sort of neighbourhood area of Lambeth is like a community of residents that are going to support that in relation to their lived experience in terms of violence impacting children and young people, or violence against women and girls. What are they wanting to do both within their locality or wider, that is actually helping us to push this agenda into every corner and every crevice of their neighbourhood, so that actually nobody can say that they don't know that actually this is about making Lambeth safer. It's more about what role are you playing to actually make this a safer neighbourhood and a safer borough. And every individual from a child to an older adult will have to take responsibility for their role in either colluding with it to maintain the same, or helping us to actually join together and make it safer. So I really welcome your wanting to join the sort of cohort, army, whatever you want to call it, of champions really to take this agenda serious and forward. We've got to make this place safer. There are people in our communities that from childhood all the way to adulthood, they've been keeping these experiences secret. I know from my own personal experience what I've held on to in relation to these experiences, and 80-90% of women have across the spectrum some sort of experience of violence against them from perpetrators, predominantly men. And it's no longer okay. It was never okay, but we're at a point here now, we're saying we're not tolerating it, and we're all joining hand in hand to make sure that we're contributing to transform the whole experience for this borough. So once again, I welcome you and many others to join us in that endeavour, because this is your borough, this is our borough, and together, of course, we can do this.
Merlin, a question for you. What are the work strands associated with delivering the VAWG strategy?
So the work strands will be led by our priority areas with oversight, so we can ensure there is coordination and involvement from across the borough. So some of the things that I touched on earlier in my presentation, in terms of the priorities that we had, it was around the whole ethos around specialist support, working together, community response, children and young people, and reducing harm from perpetrators.
So might we sort of like, so those are the priority areas, and within those, so can I just say, let's elaborate that a bit so that so we can flesh that out. So within each priority area, there will be a series of activities that are driving forward that priority. So there's an action plan of a range of activities pertaining to each work priority strand. And so there will be opportunities, in a sense, for the bit which is around community involvement. Where might people get engaged? There will be a range of activities around that. Children and young people, there's a range of activities around that, including the ones that we've mentioned around schools and education, the ones that we've mentioned around the UNICEF training that we're going to co-produce, and so forth and so forth. So that actually what we will track is a whole program management of delivery of these work strands, that we will be accountable to you, the public, about whether or not we're delivering this. And ultimately, we will be able to evaluate whether or not we are making a difference in making Lambeth safer for women and girls, because the evidence of whether or not these interventions are helping, we will be able to feed back to communities. So when rates of domestic violence, for example, is going down, right, we might be able to say that some of our activities is helping that rate and that trend to change, for example. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Merlin.
No, I don't think so. I think you've extended that response. I don't think there's anything else to add to it. I think, you know, in terms of it being program managed, the fact that you know, we will be reporting quarterly on it. It's going to be a very inclusive strategy, and I think ultimately the community will judge us on how
Yes.
we deliver.
Yes.
And that's going to be a key element of the strategy, yes, going forward.
And so what I want to sort of really emphasize is about how we want to be really transparent in terms of how we share with you progress reports about our delivery of this strategy and the delivery of the Lambeth Made Safer strategy. So we feed back to you in a range of ways, one of which will be via our Lambeth Made Communities spaces, but there will be a whole range of ways that we will make sure that you get regular progress updates on the delivery of our strategies. I get them, but for me, it's not just for me. It's actually to feed back to our communities about our effectiveness or non-effectiveness in being able to fulfill our commitments and our responsibilities on this agenda.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say in terms of feedback, because obviously it's great we've got one person who's volunteered to be a champion this evening, and you know, we don't always get it right, but we're listening. So it's really important that you engage, hopefully with us, to be able to make sure that we are able to communicate and promote what we're doing, to make sure that every young girl, every woman is safe in our borough. So really important. You may have other ways that we could get the messages out in a meaningful way, so everybody is able to access the services, because I think sometimes some people know about the services because it feels quite mainstream, but we know that there are others who find it really difficult. People may be in difficult positions. There may be things about their legal status. They may feel, you know, fearful about speaking out, but we encourage that. We want people to come and receive our support systems, and obviously there is confidentiality, you know, because what we want to see is the person, the survivor first. So that's really important. So I hope that message gets across to some of those people who have been fearful about coming forward for help.
I think that's right, and I think the additional thing about our feeding back to you is also you maintaining the feedback to us. So it's an ongoing dialogue of communication. It's a relationship. When I say between officers that are trying to deliver this strategy and coordinating the delivery of this strategy, because it's not officers on their own that are doing this, it's a range of stakeholders that are all working together across the system of education, voluntary sector and community sector, the police, etc., all working together. But what is really important is that we continue to get intelligence and feedback from yourselves about what's working, what isn't working, what could be working better, and what additional ideas that you've got, as well as those that are actually impacted directly being able to have avenues where they can go and report their concerns immediately and be taken seriously.
Thank you both. We have had now a number of offers of support to get involved in the questions, which is really positive. And just to let all attendees know that an email is now in the chat that you can access, that you can contact to get involved and share your experience and ideas. So you've got that. What I should also say is that we're at 5:40. We have a huge number of questions coming in. So I think it's a good point before I read the next question, just to say to everyone, if your question doesn't get answered in this session by Merlin and Councillor Dyer, we will provide answers to all of the questions written. So please don't worry, you will receive an answer to your questions. So Councillor Dyer, if I can come to you with this question, should Lambeth introduce a zero tolerance policy for violence against women and girls with Lambeth Police, who I think we can hear, to get the message across?
It's my house. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. So should we introduce a zero tolerance policy for violence against women and girls with Lambeth Police to get the message across?
So the police are absolutely firmly a key part of our Lambeth Made Safer partnership. So there is a statutory duty on the borough to have a community safety partnership under the Crime and Disorder Act. I can't remember what year that one is, right? But there is a statutory duty that we have a community safety partnership made up of the police, the fire service, health, the local council. Can't remember what the other one is, right?
Sure.
But and who's
Probation.
And probation. And it's within that context that we have 3 strategies that we are meant to deliver in relation to our duty. And one of them is the violence against women and girls. So we are firmly in a partnership with the police in helping us to co-produce and develop the violence against women and girls strategy and the Lambeth Made Safer strategy. And this ongoing relation is central to the delivery of this strategy and the work. So very much there is a whole range of different police roles that are firmly engaged with this agenda. And as I said, it crosses over, the roles cross over between the Lambeth Made Safer in terms of children and young people and the violence against women and girls. But there is a clear priority, especially since the kidnapping of Sarah Everard from this borough and other stories that have emerged around the level of violence against women and girls that is taking place within our borough, that have become more transparent. The police are absolutely committed to helping us to deliver this work. And there are officers fully engaged with helping us in developing our plans and our activities as part of the work streams of the strategies. So yes, one would say that we're moving towards a zero tolerance approach to violence to any violence actually within this borough, including that which is against women and girls.
The only thing I would add is, Councillor Dyer, is that you may have mentioned it, but our police are due to have some specialist training on responding to domestic abuse incidents, which we of course welcome.
Thanks both. Our next question from Anonymous. There are different types of abuse. Which one has the biggest impact or is most affecting on our community? Who would like to take that one?
Crikey. I mean, I think there is there's a plethora. Do we give it a level? You know, obviously there's domestic abuse, there's sexual violence, there's FGM, female genital mutilation, there's stalking, harassment. I guess these are the most prevalent in Lambeth. But obviously for those individual experiencing that abuse, for them it's their crisis at their time. So we need to pay attention to that, and each time we respond, that's the approach we will take. So so there are all 5 forms of violence against women and girls are connected and massively underreported. And so, you know, I'm sure there'll be new things that will get reported in time, because stalking wasn't seen as an issue. It's now become an absolute offence, and rightly so. There are additional barriers in disclosing some forms of abuse, and we need to ensure we are proactive in reaching out, encouraging disclosures and access to support, and removing barriers for all of those experiencing any kind of violence against women and girls. So again, it's an appeal to come forward, and I'm sure, you know, it is difficult. It's absolutely difficult, and I'll share something with the audience tonight. And I think the reason why this is so dear to my own heart is that I grew up in a household of domestic abuse perpetrated by my father. It wasn't just domestic abuse towards my mother, it was also towards physical abuse towards the children. And during those times, this was something that you just didn't speak about. So I think today, if I was a child now today, I probably would be in local authority care. Such was the significance of the violence. So, you know, it is really important, and I can't stress enough that we want to do everything that we can support. But what I don't want to do is put the level of abuse on a hierarchical, because anyone experiencing it, for them it's real. And so, you know, yeah, I make that point really.
So thanks for sharing that, Merlin. I think it's really important to bring our human selves and our experiences to the table, because we're all in this together, and I really respect that you feel able to share that with our communities. It's absolutely fantastic and gives us more confidence in you as the strategic director leading on this agenda, has the level of empathy that is required for this agenda. The only additional thing that I would add to that is that I think it's really important for us to understand getting into a culture of collecting data around these matters. And that's why reporting is so important, because when we report these incidents, these different experiences of the different ranges of violence and abuse, we are able to pull together that data that then enables us to attract the resources to better respond to them. And sometimes, and actually, because when you don't have the data, it's hard for resource flows to come into this area, because people will say, well, the numbers aren't there. So one of the things to support your arguments for developing more appropriate services, the numbers ain't there, so it's not really an issue. So we as women and girls have to make sure these are reported, they are named, and the data is gathered, and then we can collate that intelligence and argue and negotiate for appropriate resources in every arena where it matters, in order to help the improvement of services. So yeah, I just wanted to say that about data. And I think we just also need to mention that there is a wide range of support that's available via the Gaia Centre. So our Gaia Centre, we commissioned that. It's a national charity refuge to deliver our core community-based violence against women and girls service. And so when we're talking about services, this is a key flagship service within our portfolio of services for violence against women and girls. The Gaia Centre was one of the first integrated VAWG centres in the UK, and supports children and young people aged 11 to 17 and all adult survivors of violence against women and girls. And a wide range of support is provided via our Gaia Centre. I'm hoping somebody will put the contact details for the Gaia Centre in the chat for the people that are on this call. But the services include independent gender violence advocates for high-risk victims, community outreach workers, early intervention advocacy service specifically for young girls aged 13 to 17 years old, services for young people 11 to 17 whom are impacted on parental and familial domestic violence, and sanctuaries. We wish that had been available for you, Merlin, when you was growing up, you know, and sanctuary scheme provision for security measures to support survivors to stay safe in their own home, a group support program and peer support scheme, volunteering opportunities, and children's play worker. So you can see that even though we've had limited resources over the years, we've really been as comprehensive as we can in order to address the range of tentacles of how domestic about how violence actually impacts on women and girls. Honestly, sometimes you just feel it, you know, and it's like just palpable as a woman, and you just have a moment of like, wow. But there's clearly so much more that we have to do, and a lot of the work that we have to do is not just, well, a lot of the resource nationally has always been sort of paying attention to that which happens behind four doors, i.e. domestic abuse and stuff. We are now contended with not just four doors in terms of the familial home, it's the within schools, behind schools, in the playground, on the streets, when you're walking down the road, in the parks, in your when you're going out on a social life. I think some of the data that we were starting to collate around sexual assault within our nighttime economy areas of violence impacted, well, sexual assault on women that were out in those areas in the nighttime economy. Absolutely shocking, getting away with that. And now we're attending to all these external and internal spaces. So 360 degrees of wherever you're located, whatever time or day, as a woman and a girl, we are expanding and wanting to expand and make stronger that you be safe wherever you are. And the data in terms of helping us to expand our work is really integral to what to help us to build those cases. Can't hear you, Sophie.
Sorry, you've both answered the next question, which is brilliant, which was also, can you tell us more about the Gaia Centre for those that don't know? So that's great, and we will put contact details in. There's the next question, sorry, is how will all this work relate with drug and alcohol services, particularly as resources become tight? These play a big part in violence against women and girls. Would you like to?
It's a really good question. Merlin, can you start?
It's a very good question.
Very good question.
The questions are so great, and we're having to dig deep. But absolutely key. You know, we always have, to be fair, we've always worked in partnership with local agencies, and I think, you know, we're not an island, and we see that there's an interplay right across. And we'll continue to work in partnership as part of our draft strategy. You know, those that have been involved in helping us pull it together has been cross partnership. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of drug and alcohol services having a real, you know, more often than not, a detrimental impact in terms of domestic abuse. So I would say yes. We will continue to do that, and I think, you know, I'm just having one of my moments like Jackie. I mean, I think, yeah, we'll absolutely continue to work in partnership. It's not something that we've never that we would ever think of not doing, because we see the interrelationships in terms of domestic abuse cases. As a director of strategic director of children's services, overseeing children's social care, one of the things that is absolutely I guess in terms of the numbers of contacts we get and requests for support from families, the predominant feature is around domestic abuse, and the issues that impact on families tends to be alcohol, substance misuse, mental health, and so on and so forth. And because of COVID's now impacting on our families. Some of our families have been suffering from financial hardship. That has had an impact. So we see much more contacts coming forward in terms of support. So we will continue to evolve and bring in the necessary partnerships so we can provide responsive services to support our women and girls.
So I think that's right. I think that the point being made around reductions in the investment actually in drug and alcohol services, for example, is a cause for concern, and so I think that that we also have to advocate for resource to be maintained in those areas, if not increased, based on the level of need that we see within the borough. So I think that it's something that we have to bear front and centre, because as Merlin says, that can be a contributing factor that that is involved in domestic abuse, for example, or and some of the risk factors for why some of our children and young people end up in care, that because they may experience neglect. But yeah, and equally, I think it's really important for us to think whole systems wise, that as Merlin has said, in partnership, we also have to think about this agenda and the implications that it has for mental health services, for example, because when you think about our young women and girls, what's the impact that has on them in terms of their emotional development and their emotional well-being, and how are we responding to that from a mental health kind of perspective? What sort of access do they have to the appropriate therapies or interventions or support that is highly skilled and competent to support them as they deal with that impact, when we know actually that the vast majority of mental health challenges arise in children and young people? It starts from the age of up to 14 is the highest rate of that it was started. In fact, under 25 is the biggest proportion of adults with mental health challenges started in childhood, basically. And if we know that, how are we making sure that they're not going along that trajectory to have severe mental illness or mental health challenges in older years, knowing that we can intervene and support so much earlier? And actually, violence against women and girls is a contributing factor to people's mental health and well-being. So we have to kind of like align the strands of our thinking that then inform us in about how might we shape, for example, mental health services to better meet the needs of our communities, especially our children and young people and women and girls, is the point I'm trying to make.
I think because of time, there's 3 more published questions, but I'm actually going to go to the last one that we've published, because I think this is a really good place to end. It's a question from Penny, I think for both of you, which is, what will success look like to a visitor to Lambeth in 2027? What a great question.
Merlin.
Okay, I mean, what I'd like to see is that that we realise our ambition, that Lambeth is actually one of the safest places for not just obviously women and girls, but children, young people, families, for everyone that is in Lambeth, that they feel safe and are happy, you know, that it's a happy borough to live in. There's so much positives about Lambeth, and it's got a wealth of opportunities, and a number of people want to come and live in Lambeth, but we have this issue in terms of violence. And so that would be my ambition, that, you know, when I walk down the streets, because sometimes I walk down the streets and I just, you know, you just observe and you can see some of the stress that some of our residents are facing, and that's not just, you know, violence against women and girls, but certainly some of our black boys in Lambeth. And obviously, and one of the things that myself and Councillor Dyer is lead on is the reducing youth violence within Lambeth. So, you know, that's the ambition. It's a tough ambition to achieve. It's not going to be easy, which is why we're appealing to the community to support us with this agenda, because we can't do it on our own. No. You know, we can set up the systems, the governance, the structure, have the resources, but we also need the intelligence from our local communities to help us to achieve that ambition. So I know, you know, it might feel that we're asking and we're putting it on our residents, but we're all in it together. And I'm hoping that everyone's ambition is to achieve and aspire to the ambition of this ambitious strategy that is going to be challenging. And it's great to have political buy-in on this, because I'm sure Councillor Dyer will be lobbying everywhere to support this agenda on a local but also on a national footing.
So how can I follow that, Merlin? You've articulated it in abundance. So all I can say is that that visitor would say, wow, I'd love to live here. This feels really safe. And I like within that time scale, 6 years, Lambeth is safer. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, yes. So I'm just conscious, as Sophie has said, that you know, it is now 6 o'clock, so we're 1 minute over. If there's any questions that has been posted that hasn't been answered, please don't fret, because we will be going through them all, and we'll be providing responses, and I guess they'll be posted somewhere.
Well, what we will do is to make sure they'll be posted here, so you'll be able to access this channel. But also we'll be doing a frequently answered questions for publication via our Lambeth Made communities and all the range of communication channels that we have, in order to help to spread the message that we are all serious about delivering on this agenda and equipping everybody with the resources and the opportunities to be involved in this shared endeavour. So continue to watch this space. You'll hear this news on a regular as we harness everybody's energy to deliver on this. And so thank you for your time this evening, this afternoon. And I'm delighted to be here, actually, and I'm delighted to have my comrade Merlin and Sophie and Rose and Jake and Oana helping for this evening, to deliver this evening for you. So bye then.
Thanks very much, everyone. Goodbye.